Paul says that Iran has a right to make their nuclear bomb for defense against all their neighbors who also have nuclear bombs. Like Pakistan has a nuclear bomb, so does India, so does China. You know, here's Iran, separated by all these, surrounded by all these nuclear states that are basically like their enemies. And so he thinks, well, they have a right to defend themselves. So they assume that Ron Paul wants Iran to have a nuclear bomb. And then they also said on the radio, I think someone called in and said something like, well, I heard the CIA say that Iran has got another 10 years before they can ever develop a nuclear bomb. I'm thinking at least 10 more years. And then the talk show host said, no, they've changed that to months. It'll only be a few months until they'll have a nuclear bomb. But, you know, I talked to a physicist, a scientist, about a month ago, and I asked him if he thought that Iran could make a nuclear bomb. He said, oh, it'll be many years before they can get that advanced to make a nuclear bomb. So then this guy on the radio goes so far as to say, since Ron Paul said that Iran has a right to defend itself like any other sovereign nation, he said Ron Paul, if he could become president, would give a nuclear bomb to Iran. And I think that's preposterous. I don't think he would give a nuclear bomb to anybody. As far as I've understood his positions are to stay out of it. Don't get involved in helping any of these other nations. Don't get involved in Afghanistan, don't get involved in Iran, don't get involved in Africa or anywhere. That's my understanding of his position.
Is that the right one?
Well, it sounds a lot to me like George Washington's position, where he says to stay out of entangling alliances with other nations. Now, it seems to me like if you're going to give a nuclear bomb to a nation, you're basically entangling yourself with another nation. And Ron Paul would be against entangling alliances with other nations. Now, the Founding Fathers said this. They said, be friends with all, but have alliances with none. A lot of people say that Ron Paul wants to be an isolationist. And that's not true. He doesn't want to be... being friends with all nations is not a definition of being an isolationist, in my opinion. The Founding Fathers want to be friends with all nations. But they didn't want to have alliances with any nations, because anytime they have an alliance with another nation, the other nation goes to war, and then America is dragged into the war too, because we're the of course. If they're in a crowded theater and they yell fire, they'll have to go to jail because people will panic and get hurt. Other than that, you know, they should be able to say that they're against the policy if they want.
How about if they're selling cancer drugs?
I don't think the federal government has the right to throw people in jail for selling something. Unless, of course, it's a fraud. Or it's debauched. In other words, if it's poisonous. If somebody's selling a poison as if it were a medicine, and people die from it or injured from it, then that should be punished. But it should only be punished by the state governments, not the federal governments. The federal governments only have the power to do the 20 things the Constitution specifically outlines for the federal government. All the rest should be done by the state governments. Anyway, it's kind of weird that nowadays, maybe for the last 50 years, they've got laws in place where people are sent to prison for what they say if the establishment doesn't like what they say, which is a reversal of the Constitution's words. Unless he was in court telling an out-and-out lie, perjury. So within limits, if you're in court and you tell an out-and-out lie, then you can be an offender for a word. You can be prosecuted for your words. Or if you actually tell an out-and-out lie about someone, libeling them, you can be sued for that. But if you're telling your opinion about someone, whether they're fit to be a public official or not, then you can say any opinions you want without having to worry about being prosecuted for what your word is. Like if you call a particular presidential candidate a traitor, that's completely false, but that's your opinion. You can't be prosecuted for that. Or if you say, oh, he's a racist, you can't be prosecuted for that, even though it's totally false, because it's considered your opinion. He's a racist. Well, it's a matter of opinion. Now, if you say he actually murdered that person named so-and-so on this date, and it's false, that's libel. You know, that's totally false. You're not putting it across as your opinion. You're putting it across as a fact. That's you can get in trouble for that. You can be sued for that. You know, tell something that's totally false. But if you say, "Oh, that person's a racist," well, whether a person is a racist or not is a matter of opinion. And when you say that, you know, or when you say something like he's dishonest, that's a matter of opinion, right? You shouldn't have to be prosecuted for matters of opinion. And yet in America, it's becoming more and more you are prosecuted for your opinions. You've heard of the hate crimes legislation where if they can find out that you expressed an opinion in opposition to a certain person and then you end up hurting that person, then they'll punish you for the physical assault you did on that person, plus they'll add more punishment to it because of what you said about that type of person. In other words, they say it's a hate crime. So now they're going to start punishing people's opinions. And I think that's going beyond what the founding fathers wanted. They didn't want people to be prosecuted for their words. And that's why they wrote in it about the freedom of speech in the Bill of Rights. You know, we call it the freedom of speech and also the freedom of the press. If you give your opinions in the newspapers, you shouldn't be in fear of being prosecuted for it. Nowadays, it's even more common for people to be prosecuted when they say things, whether or not they really intend to do those things or not. For example, if a guy in a cabin starts writing down his opinions about certain groups of people, and they catch him, they prosecute him for what he wrote. If the government says that he might be a bomber, or he might be a shoe bomber, he might be a Unabomber, or whatever they call it, the person. Now, if he actually did bomb people, then yes, he should be prosecuted. But he should not be prosecuted additionally just because he wrote in a book he hates certain groups of people. That's being the thought police. We don't want our government to go there to become thought police. Like in some of those futuristic novels that were written many years ago about a future Big Brother government who was going to be a policeman of people's thoughts or of people's opinions. Now to make it even more current, there could be countries leaders of those countries can say anything they want. They can say all sorts of weird things. But we don't have the right as America to go fight a war against those people for what they say. We have a right to go to war against them for what they do. For example, if they attack America, then we have a right, theoretically, we have a right for the Congress to declare war on that country. But that country, if it doesn't ever attack America, but it says a whole bunch of things like, we want all Americans to die, or we want all Jews to die, or we want this, or we want that, those are terrible statements, but it does not give the United States the right to make a war against that country just because of their statements. Because if you make a war against a country because of their statements, that is a preemptive war. I'll give an example. Many years ago, in the 1950s, when I was just a baby, the president of Russia came, well, not the president, they all call him president of Russia. They call him the commissar or the chairman of the Communist Party or whatever their title is, you know, the secretary of the Communist USSR or something. Khrushchev, the leader of the communists in Russia, came on a visit to America, and I think he took his shoe off and started pounding the pulpit with his shoe, and he said, "We will bury you." In other words, here's the leader of a country talking to America saying, we're going to bury you. It sounds like really offensive words. It sounds like warlike words. But guess what? Nobody in America attacked him or his country because of those words. And rightly so. Those were words. We don't cause a war against the country for just words. Now, if that same leader would have started bombing American ships in the Gulf of Mexico, then that would be an act of war, and then yes, then we would actually, if our Congress declared war, then would be within the rights to declare war. Currently there's a president of Iran who's saying all sorts of mean things about America and about Jews and stuff like that. But up to this point, it's just words. And we don't cause a war against the country just because of words. And yet, the way some people are talking on the radio and in the political parties, they say that we're traitors if we don't want to go to war against Iran, because look what they said. They hate America. They said they hate Jews. See that? That means we should go to war against them. No, it doesn't mean we should go to war against them. It just means that they're using words. What happened to the Bill of Rights? People should not be afraid of saying their opinions. It might be the opinion of that Iranian president that America should be killed, but it might not be his action. Now, if it does become his action, then we should do something about it. There's some evidence of what I said. And that is, during the days before Ronald Reagan became president, there were some Iranians in Iran that took over the American embassy in Iran and basically put the Americans that were in the embassy as hostages. And the Iranians would walk through the streets chanting all these things like death to America, and then burn American flags, and then say all sorts of terrible sounding things. And the United States congressman went over there to find out what was going on. And he'd hear them, and he'd visited with them, and they would say all these terrible things, and then they'd get in private with him and talk with him. And he says, what about all these things that you said? I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said. And they said, oh, that's just our rhetoric. That's just what we say. You know, that's what we chant. That's what we say. We don't really mean it. We're not really going to do it. You know? They say all these things to make them, I guess, sound macho or, you know. We're the strong guys. You know, but they don't really do it. For example, they had taken all these American hostages, which was bad. And they acted like, we're going to kill all these hostages and stuff like that in their rhetoric. But they didn't kill them. As soon as Ronald Reagan was to be inaugurated as President of the United States, they were released. All of them. Just completely released. No harm done. Except they'd taken away their freedom. That was bad. But they didn't kill them. In other words, they were saying death to America and all these bad things, but they didn't follow through with it. The Iranian leader now is saying all these things, death to America, death to Jews, death, 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 and all kind of stuff. It's rhetoric. He's trying to get popular with his people. And that's the way that those people talk. So everyone says, well, look what he says. He comes to America and he says he hates America in his speech. It's just rhetoric. Now when he starts bombing America, actually bombing America, not just saying it, then he's their enemy. We need to fight him. Now, remember Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, was acting like he had missiles and weapons and stuff like that. And so he was being accused of all this. Well, what we found out later was he didn't have those. But he was saying it because he was trying to scare Iran out of attacking Iraq. You know, they had been enemies in the past. And if Iraq's president said, yeah, we have nothing to defend ourselves, Iran would feel like, oh, we're safe to go attack them. But here he was making this big deal, you know, we have all this stuff, you know, making it sound like you Iranians better not attack us, you better not dare. You won't. We were prepared. So it turns out that it was all a sham.